Hello. Thank you for joining me on day 3 of A Year with Aquinas, where we are going through his Summa Theologica. We are continuing in the first part on question 3, article 5, whether God is contained in a genus. You can follow along with me online at newadvent.org/summa. Objection 1. It seems that God is contained in a genus, for a substance is a being that subsists of itself, but this is especially true of God. Therefore, God is in a genus of substance. Reply to objection 1. The word substance signifies not only what exists of itself, for existence cannot of itself be a genus, as shown in the body of this article, but it also signifies an essence that has the property of existing, in this way, namely of existing of itself. This essence, however, is not its essence. Thus, this is clear that God is not in the genus of substance. Objection 2. Further, nothing can be measured save by something of its own genus, as length is measured by length and numbers by number. But God is the measure of all substances, as the commentator shows. Therefore, God is in the genus of substance. Reply to objection 2. This objection turns upon proportionate measures, which must be homogeneous with what is measured. Now, God is not a measure proportionate to anything. Still, he is called the measure of all things, in the sense that everything has being only according to its resemblance to him. On the contrary, in the mind, genus is prior to what it contains, but nothing is prior to God, either really or mentally. Therefore, God is not in any genus. I answer that a thing can be in a genus in two ways, either absolutely and properly, as a species contained in a genus, or as being reducible to it, as principles and privations. For an example, a point and unit are reduced to the genus of quantity, as principles, while blindness and all their privations are reduced to the genus of habit. But in either way is God a genus. That he cannot be a species of any genus may be shown in 3 ways. First, because a species is constituted of genus and difference. Now, that from which the difference constituting the species is derived is always related to that from which the genus is derived, as actuality is related to potentiality. For animal is derived from sensitive nature, by consertion as it were, for that is the animal, which has the sensitive nature. Rational beings, on the other hand, are derived from the intellectual nature, because that is rational, which has an intellectual nature, and intelligence is compared to sense, as actuality is to potentiality. The same argument holds good in other things. Hence, since in God actuality is not added to potentiality, it is impossible that he should be in any genus as a species. Secondly, since the existence of God is his essence, if God were in any genus, he would be the genus being, because since genus is predicated as an essential, it refers to the essence of a thing. But the philosopher has shown that being cannot be a genus, for every genus has differences distinct from its generic essence. Now, no difference can exist distinct from being, for non-being cannot be a difference. It follows then that God is not a genus. Rather, God is not in a genus. Thirdly, because all in one genus agree on the quiddity or essence of the genus which is predicated of them as essential, but they differ in their essence. For the existence of man and of horse is not the same, also of this as man this man and that man. Thus, in every member of a genus, existence and quiddity, i.e., essence, must differ, but in God they do not differ, as shown in the preceding article. Therefore, it is plain that God is not in a genus as if he were a species. From this, it is also plain that he has no genus nor difference, nor can there be any definition of him, nor save through his effects, as a demonstration of him. For a definition is from genus and difference, and the mean of demonstration is a definition. That God is not in a genus, as reducible to its principles, is clear from this. A principle reducible to any genus does not extend beyond that genus, as a point is the principle of the continuous quantity alone, and unity of a discontinuous quantity. But God is the principle of all being. Therefore, he cannot be contained in any genus as its principle. Article 6. Whether in God there are any accidents. Objection 1. It seems that there are accidents in God, for a substance cannot be an accident, as Aristotle says. Therefore, that which is an accident in one cannot be a substance. Thus, it is proved that heat cannot be the substantial form of fire, because it is an accident in other things. But wisdom, virtue, and the like, which are accidents in us, are attributes of God. Therefore, in God are the accidents. Reply to objection 1. Virtue and wisdom are not predicated of God and of us univocally. Hence, it does not follow that there are accidents in God as there are in us. Objection 2. Further, in every genus there is a first principle, but there are many genera of accidents. But if therefore the primal members of the genera are not in God, there will be many primal beings other than God, which is absurd. Reply to objection 2. Since substance is prior to its accidents, the principles of the accidents are reducible to the principles of the substance, as to that which is prior, although God is not first as if contained in the genus of substance, yet he is first in respect to all being, outside of every genus. On the contrary, every accident is in a subject, but God cannot be a subject. Quote, no simple form can be a subject, end quote, as Boethius says. Therefore, in God there cannot be any accident. I answer that. From all what we have said, it is clear that there can be no accident in God. First, because a subject is compared to its accidents as potentiality to actuality, for a subject is in some sense made actual by its accidents, but there can be no potentiality in God, as was shown. Secondly, because God is his own existence, and as Boethius says, although every essence may have something superadded to it, this cannot apply to absolute being. Thus, a heated substance can have something extraneous to heat it added to it, whereas whiteness, nevertheless, absolute heat can have nothing else added to it than heat. Thirdly, because what is essential is prior to an accident, to accidental. Whence, as God is absolute primal being, there can be nothing in him accidental. Neither can he have any essential accidents, as the capability of laughing is an essential accident of man, because such accidents are caused by the constituent principles of the subject. Now there can be nothing caused in God, since he is the first cause. Hence it follows that there are no accidents in God. Article 7. Whether God is altogether simple. Objection 1. It seems that God is not altogether simple, for whatever is from God must imitate him. Thus, from the first being are all beings, and from the first good is all good. But in the things which God has made, nothing is altogether simple. Therefore, neither is God altogether simple. Reply to objection 1. Whatever is from God imitates him, as cause things imitate the first cause. But it is of the essence of a thing to be in some sort composite, because at least it exists differs from its essence, as will be shown hereafter. Objection 2. Further, whatever is best must be attributed to God, but with us is that which is composite is better than what is simple. Thus, chemical compounds are better than simple elements, and animals better than the parts that compose them. Therefore, it cannot be said that God is altogether simple. Reply to objection 2. With us, composite things are better than simple things, because the perfections of the created goodness cannot be found in one simple thing, but in many things. But the perfection of divine goodness is found only in one simple thing. On the contrary, Augustine says, quote, God is truly and absolutely simple, end quote. I answer that the absolute simplicity of God may be shown in many ways. First, from the previous articles of this question, for there is neither composition of quantity parts of God, since he has not a body, nor composition of matter and form, nor does his nature differ from his suppositium, nor his essence from his existence, neither is in him composition of genus and difference, nor of subject and accident. Therefore it is clear that God is nowise composite, but altogether simple. Secondly, because every composite is posterior to its component parts, and is dependent on them, but God is the first being as shown above. Thirdly, because every composite has a cause, for things in themselves different cannot unite unless something causes them to unite. But God is uncaused, as shown above, since he is the first efficient cause. Fourthly, because every composite there must be potentiality and actuality. But this does not apply to God, for neither of the parts actuates another, or at least all the parts are actuated to the whole. Fifthly, because nothing composite can be predicated of any single one of its parts, and this is evident in the whole is made up of dissimilar parts. For no part of man is a man, and no part of the foot is a foot. But in wholes made up of similar parts, although something which is predicated of the whole may be predicated of a part, as a part of the air is air, and a part of water, water. Nevertheless, certain things are predicatable of whole, which cannot be predicated of any parts. For instance, if the volume of water is 2 cubits, no part of it can be 2 cubits. Thus, every composite there is something which cannot be itself. But even if this were to be said of whatever has a form, something that has which itself is not, or let me repeat that, i.e., that it has something which is not itself, as a white object, there is something which does not belong to the essence of white. Nevertheless, in its form, there is nothing besides itself. And so, since God is absolute form, or rather absolute being, he can be in no way composite. Hilary implies this argument when he says, quote, God, who is strength, is not made up of things that are weak, nor is he who is light composed of things that are dim. Article 8. Whether God enters the composition of other things. Objection 1. It seems that God enters into the composition of other things. For Dionysius says, quote, the being of all things is that which is above. Let me repeat that. The being of all things is that which is above being, the Godhead, end of quote. But the being of all things enters into the composition of everything. Therefore, God enters into the composition of other things. Reply to the first objection. The Godhead is called the being of all things as their efficient and exemplar cause, but not as being their essence. Objection 2. Further, God is a form, for Augustine says that, quote, the Word of God, which is God, is an uncreated form, end quote. But a form is a part of a compound. Therefore, God is a part of some compound. Reply to objection 2. The Word is an exemplar form, but not a form that is part of a compound. Objection 3. Further, whatever things exist, in no way differing from each other, are the same. But God and primary matter exist, and in no way differ from each other. Therefore, they are absolutely the same. But primary matter enters into the composition things. Therefore, also does God. Proof of the minor, whatever things differ, they differ by some differences, and therefore must be composite. But God and primary matter are altogether simple. Therefore, they nowise differ from each other. Reply to objection 3. Simple things do not differ by added differences, for this is the property of compounds. Thus, man and horse differ by their differences, rational and irrational, By differences, however, they do not differ from each other by other differences. Hence, to be quite accurate, it is better to say that they are not different but diverse. Hence, according to the philosopher, quote, things which are diverse are absolutely distinct, but things which are different differ by something, end quote. Therefore, strictly speaking, primary matter and God do not differ, but are by their very being diverse. Hence, it does not follow that they are the same. On the contrary, Dionysius says, quote, there can be no touching him, end quote, i.e. God, begin quote again, or nor any other union with him by mingling part with part, end quote. Further, the first cause rules all things without commingling with him, as the philosopher says. I answer that. On this point, there have been three errors. Some have affirmed that God is the world soul, as is clear from Augustine. This is practically the same as the opinion of those who assert that God is the soul of the highest heaven. Again, others have said that God is the formal principle of all other things, and this was the theory of the Almarchians. The third error is that of David of Dinant, who most absurdly taught that God was primary matter. Now, all of these contain manifest untruths, since it is not possible for God to enter into the composition of anything, either as a formal or material principle. First, because God is the first efficient cause. Now, the first efficient cause is not identically numeral with the form of the thing caused, but only specifically. For man begets man. But primary matter can neither be numerically nor specifically identical with an efficient cause, for the former is merely potential, while the latter is actual. Secondly, because since God is the first efficient cause, to act belongs to him primarily and essentially. But that which enters into composition with anything does not act primarily and essentially, but rather the composite so acts. So, for the hand does not act, but the man by his hand, and fire warms by its heat. Hence, God cannot be part of a compound. Thirdly, because no part of a compound can be absolutely primal among beings, not even matter nor form, though they are primal parts of every compound. For matter is merely potential, and potentiality is absolutely posterior to actuality, as is clear from the foregoing. While a form which is part of a compound is a participated form, and as that which participates is posterior to that which is essential, so likewise is that which is participated. As fire and ignited objects is posterior to fire, which is essential such. Now it has been proved that God is absolutely primal being. Question 4. The perfection of God. Article 1. Whether God is perfect. Objection 1. It seems that perfection does not belong to God. For we say a thing is perfect if it is completely made. But it does not benefit God to be made. Therefore, he is not perfect. Objection 1. As Gregory says, quote, though our lips can only stammer, yet we chant the high things of God, end quote. For that which is not made is improperly called imperfect. Nevertheless, because created things are called perfect, when from potentiality they are brought into actuality, this word perfect signifies whatever is not wanting in actuality, whether this be by way of perfection or not. Objection 2. Further, God is the first being of things. Rather, God is the first beginning of things. But the beginning of things seems to be imperfect, as seed is the beginning of animal and vegetable life. Therefore, God is imperfect. The material principles, which with us is found to be imperfect, cannot be absolutely primal, but must be preceded by something perfect. For seed, though it be principle of animal life, reproduced through seed, has prevised it. to it, the animal or the plant which came for it. Because previous to that, which is potential, must be something which is actual, since a potential being can only be reduced into act by something that's already actual. Objection 3. Further, as shown above, God's essence is existence, but existence seems most imperfect, since it is the most universal and receptive of all modifications. Therefore, God is imperfect. Reply to objection 3. Existence is the most perfect of all things, for it is compared to all things as by which they are made actually. For nothing has actuality except so far as it exists. Hence, existence is that which actuates all things, even their forms. Therefore, it is not compared to other things as the receiver is to the received, but rather as the received is to the receiver. When therefore I speak to the existence of man, or a horse, or anything else, existence is considered a formal principle, as something received, not as that which exists. On the contrary, it is written, quote, "Be you perfect, as also your heavenly Father is perfect." End quote, Matthew 5:48. I answer that, as the philosopher relates, some ancient philosophers, namely the Pythagoreans and Leucippus, did not predicate best and most perfect of the first principle. The reason was that the ancient philosophers considered only a material principle, and a material principle is most imperfect. For since matter, as such, is merely potential, the first material principle must be simply potential, and thus most imperfect. Now, God is the first principle, not material, but an order of efficient cause, which must be most perfect. For just as matter, as such, is merely potential, an agent, as such, is in the state of actuality. Hence, the first active principle must needs to be most actual, and therefore most perfect. For a thing is perfect in proportion to its state of actuality, but we call that perfect, which lacks nothing of mode of its perfection. Article 2. Whether the perfections of all things are in God. Objection 1. It seems that the perfections of all things are not in God. For God is simple, as shown above, whereas the perfections of things are many and diverse. Therefore, the perfections of all things are not in God. Reply to objection 1. Even as the sun, while remaining one and shining uniformly, contains within itself first and uniformly the substances of sensible things, in many diverse quantities. A fortiori should all things in a kind of natural unity exist, and the cause of all things, and thus things diverse and in themselves opposed to each other pre-exist in God as one, without injury to his simplicity. This suffices for the reply to the second objection. Further, opposites cannot coexist. Now, or rather, objection 2, further, opposites cannot coexist. Now, the perfections of things are opposite to each other, for each thing is perfected by its specific differences, but the differences by which genera are divided are species constituted, and species constituted are opposite to each other. Therefore, because opposites cannot coexist in the same subject, it seems that perfections of all the things are not in God, which we already heard the objection was the same for objection 1. So, objection 3. Further, a living thing is more perfect than what merely exists, an intelligent thing than what merely lives. Therefore, life is more perfect than existence, and knowledge more than life. But the essence of God is existence itself. Therefore, he has not the perfection of life and knowledge and of other similar perfections. Reply to objection 3. The same Diogenes says, although existence is more perfect than life and life than wisdom, if they are considered and distinguished as an idea, nevertheless a thing is more perfect than what merely exists, because living things also exist, and intelligent things both exist and live. Although therefore existence does not include life and wisdom, but because that which participates in existence need not participate in every mode of existence, nevertheless God's existence includes in itself life and wisdom, because nothing of the perfection of the being can be wanting to him who is subsiding in being itself. On the contrary, Dionysius says that, quote, God in his one existence presupposes all things, end quote. I answer that all created perfections are in God, hence he is spoken of as universally perfect, because he lacks not any excellence which may be found in any genus. This may be seen in two considerations. First, because whatever perfection exists is an effect must be found in the effective cause, either in the same formality if it is an unevocable agent, as in when man reproduces man, or in a more imminent degree if it is an evocable agent. Thus, is in the sun is a likeness of whatever is generated by the sun's power. Now, it is plain that the effect pre-exists virtually the efficient cause, and although to pre-exist in the potentiality of a material cause is to pre-exist in a more imperfect way, since matter as such is imperfect and an agent as such is perfect, still to pre-exist virtually in the same efficient cause is to pre-exist not in a more imperfect but in a more perfect way. Since therefore God is the first efficient cause of all things, the perfections of all things must pre-exist in God in a more eminent way. Dionysius implies that the same line of argument by saying of God, quote, it is not that he is this and not that, but that he is all, as the cause of all, end quote. Secondly, from what has already been proved, God is existence itself, of itself substance. Consequently, he must contain within him the whole perfection of being. For this, it is clear that if something hot has not the whole perfection of heat, this is because heat is not participated in its full perfection. But if this were heat, but if this heat were self-subsisting, nothing of the virtue of heat would be wanting to it. Since therefore God is subsisting being itself, nothing of perfection of being can be wanting to him. Now all created perfections are included in the perfection of being, for things are perfect precisely so far as they have being after some fashion. It follows therefore that the perfection of no one thing is wanting to God. Therefore the line of argument too is implied by Dionysius when he says that, quote, God exists not in any single mode, but embraces all being within himself, absolutely, without limitation, uniformly, end quote. And afterwards he adds that, quote, he is the very existence to subsisting things, end quote. Article 3. Whether any creature can be like God. Objection 1. It seems that no creature can be like God, for it is written, Psalm 85, verse 8, quote, there is none among the gods like unto thee, O Lord, end quote. But of all creatures, the most excellent are those which are called participation gods. Therefore, still less can other creatures be said to be like God. Reply to objection 1. As Dionysius says, when Holy Writ declares that nothing is like God, it does not mean to deny all likeness to him. For, quote, the same things can be like and unto like God, like according as they imitate him, as far as he, who is not perfectly imitatable, can be imitated, unto unlike according as they fall short of their cause, end quote. Not merely in intensity and remission, as that which is less white falls short of that which is more white, but because they are not in agreement, specifically or generically. Objection 2. Further, likeness implies comparison, but there can be no comparison between things in a different genus. Therefore, neither can there be any likeness. Thus, we do not say that sweetness is like whiteness, but no creature is in the same genus as God, since God is no genus, as shown above. Therefore, no creature is like God. Reply to objection 2. God is not related to creatures as through belonging to a different genus, but as transcending every genus, and as the principle of all genera. Objection 3. Further, we speak of those things which as like which agree in form, but nothing can agree with God in form, save for in God alone. Essence and existence differ. Therefore, no creature can be like to God. Reply to objection 3. Likeness of creatures to God is not affirmed on account of agreement in form according to the formality of the same genus or species, but solely according to analogy, inasmuch God is essentially being, whereas other things are beings by participation. I think I'm okay, there we go. Objection 4. Further, among like things rather, there is mutual rather, let me start over. Objection 4. Further, among like things there is mutual likeness, for like is like to like. If therefore any creature is like God, God will be like some creature, which is against what is said by Isaiah, quote, to whom you have likened your God, end quote. Isaiah 40:18. Reply to objection 4. Although it may be admitted that creatures are in some sort like God, it must be nowise be admitted that God is like creatures, because, as Dionysius says, quote, a mutual likeness may be found between things of the same order, but not between a cause and that which is caused, end quote. For we say that a statue is like a man, but not conversely. So also creatures can be spoken of in the same sort, like God, but not that God is like a creature. On the contrary, it is written, quote, let us make man to our image and likeness, end quote. Genesis 1:26. And, quote, when he shall appear, we shall be like to him, end quote. 1 John 3:2. I answer that, since likeness is based upon agreement or communication in form, it varies according to the many modes of communication in form. Some things are said to be like which communicate in the same form, according to the same formality, and according to the same mode, and these are said to be not merely alike, but equal in their likeness, as two things equally white are said to be alike in whiteness, and this is the most perfect likeness. In another way, we speak of things as alike which communicates in form according to the same formality, though not according to the same measure, but according to more or less, as something is less white said to something that is more white, and this is imperfect likeness. In a third way, some things are said to be alike which communicates in the same form, but not according to the same formality, as we see in non-univocable agents. For since every agent reproduces itself so far as is an agent, and everything acts according to the manner of its form, the effect must in some way resemble the form of the agent. If therefore the agent is contained in the same species as its effect, there will be a likeness and form between that which makes and that which is made, according to the same formality of the species, as man reproduces man. If, however, the agent and the effect are not contained in the same species, there will be a likeness, not according to the formality of the same species, as things generated by the sun's heat may be in some sort spoken of as like the sun, not as though they received the form of the sun and its likeness, but in its specific likeness, but in its generic likeness. Therefore, if there is an agent not contained in any genus, its effect will still more distantly produce the form of the agent, not that is, as to participate in the likeness of the agent's form according to the same specific or generic formality, but only according to some sort of analogy, as existence is common to all. In this way, all created things, so far as they are beings, are like God, as the first and universal universal principle of all beings. Question 5. Goodness in general. Article 1. Whether goodness differs really from beings. Objection 1. It seems that goodness differs really from beings. As Boethius says, quote, I have perceived that in nature the fact that things are good is one thing, and that they are is another. End quote. Therefore, goodness and being really differ. Reply to objection 1. Although goodness and being are the same, really, nevertheless they differ in thought. They are not predicated of a thing absolutely in the same way, since being properly signifies that something actually is. In actuality, properly correlates to potentiality. A thing, in consequence, said simply, to have being, according as it is primarily distinguished from that which is only in potentiality. And this is precisely each thing's substantial being. Hence, by its substantial being, everything is said to have being simply. But by any further actuality, it is said to have relatively. Thus, to be white implies relative being, for to be white does not take a thing out of simple potential being, because only a thing that actually has being can receive this mode of being. But goodness signifies perfection which is desirable, and consequently of ultimate perfection. Hence, that which has ultimate perfection is said to be simply good, but that which has not the ultimate perfection it ought to have, although insofar it is as actual, it has some perfection. It is not said to be perfect nor good simply, but only relatively. In this way, therefore, viewed in its primal, i.e., substantial, being, a thing is said to be simply, and to be good relatively, i.e., insofar as it has being. But viewed in its complete actuality, a thing is said to be relatively and to be good simply. Hence the saying of Boethius, quote, I have perceived that in nature the fact that things are good is one thing, and that they are is another, quote, end of quote, is referred to a thing's goodness simply, in having being simply. And because regarded in its primal actuality, a thing simply exists, and regarding in its complete actuality, it is good simply, in such short that even in its primal actuality, it is in some sort good, and even its complete actuality, it has some sort of being. Objection 2. Further, nothing can be its own form, quote, but that is called good, which has the form of being, end quote, according to the commentary on De Caucus. Therefore, goodness differs really from being. Reply to objection 2. Goodness is a form so far as absolute goodness signifies complete actuality. Objection 3. Further, goodness can be more or less, but a being cannot be more or less. Therefore, goodness differs really from being. Reply to objection 3. Again, goodness is spoken as more or less according to a thing's superadded actuality. For example, as to knowledge or virtue. On the contrary, Augustine says, quote, inasmuch as we exist, we are good, end quote. I answer that goodness and being are really the same, and differ only in idea, which is clear from the following argument. The essence of goodness consists in this, that it is in some way desirable. Hence, the philosopher says, quote, goodness is what all desire, end quote. Now, it is clear that a thing is desirable only insofar as it is perfect, for all desire their own perfection. But everything is perfect so far as it is actual. Therefore, it is clear that a thing is perfect so far as it exists, for the existence that makes all things actual, as is clear from the foregoing. Hence, it is clear that goodness and being are really the same, but goodness presents the aspects of desirableness, which being does not present. Article 2. Whether goodness is prior an idea to being. Objection 1. It seems that goodness is prior an idea to being, for names are arranged according to arrangement of the things signified by the names. But Dionysius assigned to the first place among the other names of God to his goodness rather than his being. Therefore, an idea, goodness, is prior to being. Reply to Objection 1. Dionysius discusses the divine names as implying some casual relation in God. For we name God, as he says, from creatures, as a cause from its effects. But goodness, since it has the aspect of desirable, implies the idea of a final cause, the causality of which is among the first causes, since an agent does not act except for some end, and by an agent matter is moved from its form. Hence, the end is called the cause of causes. Thus, goodness as a cause is prior to being, as the end to the form. Therefore, among the names signifying the design causality, goodness precedes being. Again, according to the Platonists, who through not distinguishing primary matter from privation, said that matter was non-being, goodness is more extensively participated in being. For primary matter participates in goodness as it tends to, for all seek their like, but does not participate in being, since it is presumed to be non-being. Therefore, Dionysius says that goodness extends to non-existence. End of quote. Objection 2. Further, that which is merely extensive is prior an idea, but goodness is more extensive than being, because as Dionysius notes, quote, goodness extends to things both existing and non-existing, whereas existence extends to existing things alone. End quote. Therefore, goodness is an idea prior to being. Reply to Objection 2. The same solution is applied to this objection, or it may be said that goodness extends to existing and non-existing things, not so far as it can be predicated of them, but so far as it can cause them. If indeed by non-existence we understand not simply those things which do not exist, but those which are potential and not actual. For goodness has the aspect of the end, in which not only actual things find their completion, but also towards which tend even those things which are not actual, but merely potential. Now, being implies the habitude of a formal cause only, either inherent or exemplar, and its causality does not extend save to those things which are called actual. Objection 3. Further, what is more universal is prior an idea, but goodness seems to be more universal than being, since goodness has the aspect of desirable, whereas to some non-existence is desirable. For it is said of Judas, quote, it were better for him if that man had never been born. End quote. Matthew 26:24. Therefore, an idea, goodness is prior to being. Reply to Objection 3. Non-being is desirable, not of itself, but only relatively, inasmuch as the removal of evil, which can only be removed by non-being, is desirable. Now, the removal of evil cannot be desirable, except so far as this evil deprives a thing of some being. Therefore, being is desirable of itself, and non-being only relatively, inasmuch as one seeks some mode of being which cannot bear to be deprived. Thus, even non-being can be spoken of as being relatively good. Objection 4. Further, not only is existence desirable, but life, knowledge, and many other things besides. Thus, it seems that existence is a particular appetible, and goodness a universal appetible. Therefore, absolutely, goodness is prior an idea to being. Reply to Objection 4. Life, wisdom, and the like are desirable only so far as they are actual. Hence, in each one of them, some sort of being is desired, and thus nothing can be desired except being, and consequently nothing is good except being. On the contrary, it is said by Aristotle that, quote, the first thing of created things is being, end quote. I answer that, in idea, Being is prior to goodness. For the meaning signified by the name of a thing is that which the mind conceives of the thing and intends by the word that it stands for. Therefore, that is prior an idea which is conceived first by the intellect. Now, the first thing conceived by the intellect is being, because everything is knowable only inasmuch as it is in actuality. Hence, being is the proper object of the intellect, and is primarily intelligible, as the sound which is primarily audible. Therefore, an idea, being is prior to goodness. Well, thank you for joining me, and if you made it this far, I hope that you've enjoyed this recording, and I apologize for any mistakes I make. If you found it helpful to your spiritual life or philosophical life, please share it with another. I hope to see you tomorrow with day 4, where we will continue on to question 5, article 3. God bless you and have a good day.